Hello, I'm Stacy Gustafson, and this is an open Citizen Assembly meeting. With me here today is Dan Bader, retiree of the Chicago Department of Health. And today he is going to present on the 4 need areas and community quality of life. So thanks for being here, Dan, and take her away.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. So I'm going to go, in the conceptual framework that I always used when I was a practicing therapist it was called the building blocks of mental health, the 3 building blocks of mental health. And it's a conceptual framework which allows people in communities to understand what it is they need to attend to in order to prevent unnecessary mental health problems from occurring. And, I used it in my practice when I was working. I also went out into communities in Chicago and presented mental health, 3 building blocks of mental health, and other presentations that kind of are related to it. And my ultimate goal was let people get the psychoeducational input that they need to take care of themselves in their own communities without having to rely on professional mental health providers, psychiatrists, etc. That's not to say that therapy can't be useful. But it's important to be able to understand that in many, many cases, it might not be necessary. Okay, so today I'm going to talk, so with the 3 building blocks of mental health, we have emotion management, boundary setting appropriate interpersonal and intrapersonal boundaries, and then we have making sure that our human need areas, there's 4 of them, that those have to be attended to all the time. And so what I'm going to do is try to help you have an understanding of what these need areas are actually about. They're really rooted in our human nature, whether if you believe that our world was created by God, or you believe that it's a product of evolution, it really doesn't make any difference, because in a sense, we're hardwired to live in small groups, hunting, gathering, foraging type of groups. Usually the number put on the group size is about 150. Now that would, consist of little nuclear families banded together, forming a community, a small community. And in order for a hunting gathering type community to be able to survive, they have to have group cohesion. Cooperation is necessary. And in these groups, if there were members of the group who deviated from the cultural expectations of the group, they were met with usually the first level of penalty or punishment would be group shaming of the individuals who were violating the standards, expectations of the group. That was a very powerful, painful kind of a penalty. Yes, Stacy.
Is that something that happens with primates as well?
Well, of course, the thing with primates is that, and I think it's important, to make this distinction, and I'm generally speaking, primates aren't able to use shame. They're able to use physical coercion, just like even insects, social insects use physical coercion on their members when they are doing something they're not supposed to. They'll get a little bite. And so, you know, you think of the emotion of shame in this way, and maybe I'm simplifying it too much, but think of it this way. If you're in a small group and you need everybody to contribute to the group in order to survive, because we're talking in, you know, hunting, gathering, foraging situations, you know, survival is a crucial issue, not what we live, you know, not for those of us who live in these modern industrial societies. Uh, so shame is a substitute for physical violence. It's very painful. We all know that probably shame hurts more than any other emotion, right? I mean, you can be sad, you know, you can be worried, but if you are feeling deep shame, you know that is really painful and intense. And so if you think of it this way, um, you know, you're going to have people in your group, some of whom might violate the group expectations for survival and cohesion. If every time somebody, you know, because to err is, you know, human, if every time somebody messes up, you're going to physically attack them, you might permanently injure them or kill them. That means you're now down another group member and you can't really afford to have that go on, right? You won't have a group left after a while. So we use the emotion of shame as a substitute. It hurts plenty. You know, it's very, very painful, but it doesn't physically disable somebody or kill them. And so the person who gets shamed has the opportunity to change their ways, so to speak. And that's very, very important. Now, so I'm going to go to the third building block of mental health, the human need areas, and to realize that each one of these is in some way connected to a harmonious group cooperation. So let me go down here. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Okay, I got to go up a little bit. Okay, so I always start this particular building block with discussing the difference between the conscious and unconscious mind. Actually, let me go up one more. So here we have the third building block of mental health, need satisfaction is how it's termed here on this slide. And I say the four need areas are financial material stability, emotional support, community involvement, individual development. The needs must be minimally satisfied in order to obtain and sustain mental health. Now I'm talking about, you know, because I was doing mental health. And so it's always with an emphasis on, you know, mental health, but that's an important thing to understand. Now, mood states, you know, mood states are considered to be kind of longer spans of time where you're in an emotional place, like maybe you're depressed, sad, etc. Mood states are associated with chronic need area deficiencies because emotional pain can be very brief and day to day, where that's always going to be there and it has to be managed. But emotional pain that is associated with these human need areas, financial material stability, emotional support, community involvement, individual development, this emotional pain is chronic. If these areas are not taken care of, you will get this emotional pain daily, essentially. It's going to be a long haul. Now, the need areas and the chronic emotional pain associated with deficiencies is rooted in the reality that social group cohesion and survivability is dependent upon the collective altruism, honesty, and emotional self-control of group members. And, you know, it's very, very critical. because in a hunting, gathering, foraging situation, as I've said, the group won't survive if you have what are referred to as in some of the evolutionary psychology literature and just biological evolutionary literature as free riders, meaning people who use aggression and dishonesty to take advantage of others in a group. You can't have that going on because it's so destructive, and we'll go into it. So if we look at, let's go up here to this. So in order to appreciate, I'll go over this quickly, and I know sometimes people have difficulty with this, but because they've already been programmed, understandably, with the different ways of thinking about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Some people in mental health areas still have almost sometimes a Freudian psychodynamic understanding of consciousness, unconsciousness. But for purposes of understanding these need areas, this is the way I think is most helpful. So I say here, the conscious mind is rooted in the modern world. It is very aware of modern technology, hospitals, supermarkets, food banks, homeless shelters, and telephone numbers. The conscious mind knows that we can call 911 if we are sick. It knows an ambulance will transport us to the hospital and doctors and nurses will look after us. That's our conscious mind. It's rooted in the modern world. That's how we live. But the unconscious mind is not created for life in what we're in right now. It's created, again, whether you like to think of it as created by God or just evolved, it's for small group living situations, small groups. And generally, the number a lot of times is thrown out there. It's not going to exceed 150. And so the unconscious mind is rooted in a hunting, gathering, foraging world, a tribal world consisting of families banded together. It is not aware of the modern world. The unconscious mind constantly monitors our drive states and our thoughts to determine if our human needs are being met. If the unconscious perceives that our needs are being inadequately attended to, it will transmit emotional pain into our consciousness. So a lot of times in the modern world, we can make decisions which we think are good for us, like, so oftentimes in mental health settings, you encounter people who've been very traumatized when they were children or into adulthood, and they're fed up with humanity, and they prefer to isolate themselves. And if they have an income which puts shelter over them and food on the table, they can lead a relatively isolated life, thinking that they are, cocooning, protecting themselves. But it's a huge mistake, because they're going to be constantly tormented with chronic emotional pain. Because if in a hunting, gathering, foraging type world, if you are isolated, you're as good as dead. You're not going to survive. And the unconscious mind knows that. And it doesn't know that we can exist in this modern world relatively isolated if we choose to. But you're going to have a lot of emotional pain, and you're going to have to do something to manage that emotional pain, or you will have a complete mental emotional breakdown. So, okay, so we've talked about the conscious, unconscious mind. So let's look at this first human need, which is pretty commonsensical. We need to have financial material stability in place. That means if you and your family can reliably obtain the necessities of life, again, food on the table, shelter, money that you need to buy things. Now, in a hunting gathering world, you don't really have money. We don't have finance, all of the things that we associate our modern life with. So if the unconscious mind perceives that the preservation of material stability is at stake, it will generate chronic emotional pain, usually a combination of anxiety, shame, and frustration, anger. Now, a lot of times when I've done this presentation, I haven't included shame, but today I'm doing that. Actually, you can also obviously get sadness, another negative, emotional state. But of course, the anxiety is concerned with what am I going to do if I don't have the material things I need to survive? What's going to happen to me, or what's going to happen to my loved ones? You have frustration, anger, because it doesn't seem right or it doesn't seem fair, the deprivation. And then you can have shame because, of course, in so many situations, one's status and self-esteem is associated with their financial material status, what they have and what they kind of control. So if financial material stability is at risk and is not there, and we see this in so many communities, just talking the United States, where you have either large near poverty or poverty populations. They're constantly suffering chronic emotional pain. And if for one person, it's mostly frustration, anger, another it's shame, or whatever mix. This is what you have going on chronically. And as I've like to underline, usually if you have this chronic emotional pain going on too long, the average person is going to suffer a complete psychological emotional breakdown. Those breakdowns like that end in psychiatric hospitalization, incarceration, suicide, or completely ruining and damaging relationships that you have, or some combination thereof. It's not a good place to go to. Most people will try to avoid it. In order to do that to some degree, they have to kill the chronic emotional pain. And people generally use drugs, alcohol being a common drug, smoking cigarettes, eating comfort food, watching TV, gambling, looking at pornography on the internet if they have an internet, or other kinds of sexual addictions. They do whatever it is they can to anesthetize day to day this chronic emotional pain that they instinctively understand at some point they're going to snap. Okay, so that's the first human need. The second human need is an emotional support system. And I make this pretty concrete. An adequate emotional support system is in place if you are attached/bonded to 4 to 6 individuals with whom there is a mutual obligation to help one another if either you or the other person is sick, injured, or in great distress. Now, in a hunting, gathering, foraging, kind of small tribal lifestyle, where we don't have the modern life that our conscious mind, as I've defined it, is all familiar with. I'll just call 911. I don't need anybody. The ambulance will get me, and I'll be at a hospital, and I'll get medical care. No problem. But in the primitive environments we're talking about here, that we are basically evolved or created to exist in, we don't have the modern world. We have to depend on one another to take care of us. If I damage my leg, who's going to help me out and let me heal? I have to depend on other people to do that, to help me heal, to maybe carry me, whatever. And so we have to understand that an emotional support system, as I'm defining it here, is essential for survival in that environment. Now, it's not essential in our modern world, but the unconscious mind, which generates this chronic emotional pain, doesn't know about the modern world. It just, again, it's going to monitor our drive states and our thoughts to determine if we have a problem. And again, the unconscious mind does not care who is in your emotional support system. Any combination of significant other, family members, friends, and associates is acceptable. It's not a problem who it is, you just need it. If the unconscious perceives your emotional support is weak or absent, it will generate chronic emotional pain, usually a combination of anxiety, shame, and loneliness, sadness. It can also obviously generate anger, kind of the fourth little negative emotion. Um, it just simply will not tolerate you being uh, without emotional support because it feels like you can't survive. In your conscious mind, yeah, I can survive. So I can make, if you think that way, you can make a decision to relatively isolate yourself and think that it's rational. And in a lot of cases, you're actually protecting yourself from other human beings who might hurt you, or as they've done in the past. So we want to, again, just kind of realize that emotional support is key. And the thing about emotional support, which, the second building block of mental health is boundary setting. And you can't have people in your emotional support system, even if they are signed on to I'll help you, you help me, kind of a thing, that are abusive, that are attacking your identity, trying to hurt you emotionally, because that just cancels out really the benefit of it. And that's just something to keep in mind. It's like a lot of times, well, yeah, I know I can count on my mom to help me out, but she's always, attacking me, criticizing me. You know, that's not an ideal emotional support system. She's your mom, you can still have her, but maybe you need somebody else too that you can have in there. Now, I say 4 to 6 individuals. The literature on this, some of it's anthropological, but the literature on this, kind of the consensus is once you get up to beyond 6, it ceilings out. You don't really get much of a benefit of having more. As you start to go down from 4, let's say it's 3. Well, 3 is passable, I guess. But once you get down to 2, 1, and 0, as you go down, you're going to be much more vulnerable to having this chronic emotional pain. And it also leads to sometimes very maladaptive behaviors. Think of somebody who the only one they can count on is their significant other. That's it. Well, we are programmed to, get jealous anyway for other reasons, but you can imagine if somebody has only one person in their emotional support system, they might become very, very coercive in terms of keeping that person close. And it can really lead to, the commonsensical problems that we all know exist. Okay, so that's the second human need area, emotion. It's the emotional support system. Now, what did I do there? Sorry about that. Okay, now, so here I'm introducing something that's important to understand. I call this the constraints on the maintenance of emotional support. These are things which can mess up your ability to have a well-functioning emotional support system. One is predatory instrumental behavior, bullying, making threats. This is, and believe me, in these hunting gatherings, there's a pretty good literature out there on these. We have a number of them have been in existence in modern times. We also have, ethnographies and so on of others, but they will not tolerate predatory instrumental behavior. Anybody who decides suddenly, I'm going to dominate, I'm going to push around, I'm going to take, make threats, that person will be subject to a group shaming in these groups, generally speaking, if not worse. But, as I said earlier, if you don't use shame and you just go to physical attack to get somebody to stop their, say, bullying or making threats, that kind of disruptive behavior, which interferes with cooperation and group cohesion, then you're going to lose a lot of members. You won't have, your group will really be messed up. So shame is the preferred method because it's very painful to get shamed. So this, but any predatory instrumental behavior interferes with the ability to sustain a good emotional support system. We also have deceptive instrumental behavior, lying, stealing, cheating, for example. It's called in the evolutionary psychology or evolutionary biology literature, it's called free riding, both of these. The predatory instrumental behavior and the deceptive instrumental behavior are called, they refer to it as free riding. And it's very, very damaging. And I would just say, I'm not going to tangent on it too much, but what we live in our modern world here in the United States, this kind of a culture is very, very sociopathic or psychopathic. You choose your word, but it incentivizes it, and it allows people who, again, in the evolutionary psychology, biology literature, the way they talk about it is we have genes which promote kind of altruistic behavior, which is very good for group cohesion, being generous, being cooperative, being able to help others, even though they're not directly paying you back at a given point in time, just kind of expecting, maybe I'm helping you, you're in need. Maybe someday somebody else will help me in the group when I might be in need. So they talk about it as we have these genes which promote what they call altruism. And then we also have genes which promote this kind of free riding behavior. And sort of the idea is that, the free riding type of behavior needs to be punished. It needs to be penalized. And usually that will happen in these groups because they know if it's not, it'll be a problem. Now, and then of course, the evolutionary type stuff goes with, generation after generation after generation. Why doesn't the free riding genes die out if they're being punished and penalized? And the reason they say is, well, people learn, even though that's their tendency to be that way genetically, they're very prone to being predatory or deceptive. They learn that, well, if I give in to my urge, it's not going to go well for me. I may not be able to go on. And so they just restrain themselves. And, that's what laws are for, so we also have to understand that beyond the instrumental behavior problems, we can have maladaptive anger management. If I can't control my anger well and treat people, even though I'm angry at you, I still remain respectful. That's going to be hard for me to maintain emotional support because you won't want to be around me, much less be there to support me. You might actually be more wanting to hurt me in some way when you get a chance. And we also have the problem of maladaptive interest excitement management, because interest excitement makes us impulsive and hard to resist doing things. And that can include shoplifting, stealing, it goes on and on. And so we have to be able to manage these emotions. That's why within the 3 building blocks, framework, it all has to be taken care of, and comprehensively. And then we also have the inability to set respectful interpersonal and intrapersonal boundaries. Because if I can't set a boundary on you when you're maybe teasing me or, that kind of thing, hurting my feelings, as we say, then that's going to be a problem. We're not going to be, we may not be able to be linked together emotionally. So it's important to understand. So these are constraints on the maintenance of emotional support. Okay, then I also want to, now these are correlative consequences of deficient emotional support that I think we all kind of are, first of all, you're going to get chronic emotional pain. That's one right away. You're also, we need to note that feeling unwanted can alter the flow of growth hormones and sometimes stunt the growth of children. It's pretty serious. We know that monkeys taken away from families and friends experience arterial blockage and heart disease. And we also know from, the Romanian orphanage experiences and things like this, what happens to these children who are deprived. In an experiment, rabbits that were petted and hugged live 60% longer than those in the no attention condition. That's what we get from our emotional support people, it's part of it. The loss of a significant other often leads to a sharp drop in immune system strength 1 to 2 months after the loss. Well, we know nowadays immune systems are really important, and it's always important. So these are consequences, of deficient emotional support. So we go into the third need, and this is community involvement. So community involvement is in place if you are a contributing member of a group cooperating together in order to achieve a goal or carry out a mission. Now, in a hunting, gathering, foraging type group, you're born into the group. That's it. You're not, that's where you are stuck, for better or worse. Now, and so this third human need area, community involvement, is very, very critical. And I say the unconscious mind doesn't care what kind of community involvement you have. It just cares that you have one in place. So, it really doesn't make any difference to the unconscious mind. It just wants you to be part of a community where you are a contributing, cooperating member. And it believes if you're not, well, you're done, really. They're going to, maybe they'll group shame you first, but if you don't even respond to, say, a group shaming, they'll just expel you from the group or kill you. You'll get a capital punishment. And they know very well that, again, if you don't have the group in those kind of living situations, you don't survive. So our unconscious mind believes that's what we're in, does not know about the modern world. So it doesn't matter, what you may think. You must respect the unconscious mind, as I'm defining it here, in addition to what consciously about what you can do. And so I point out here, it is as satisfied with street gang or organized crime activity as it is with civic-minded pursuits. And in the anthropological literature, you have many different kinds of groups. Some of them are very violent, actually, very predatory, not within necessarily, but they are to outsiders. Just as, again, you just see that totally in the, simian world, when you're talking about chimpanzees, for example, you see it very, very clearly. They will very quick, and you see it in other animal species too. If you're an outsider, you're not going to get treated well, pretty much. So that's important to realize. And if the unconscious perceives the community involvement is absent, it will generate chronic emotional pain, usually a combination of anxiety and shame. It could other emotions too. So just to give a quick reminder before I go to the fourth need area, let me see if I can get up here to, is this the shame diagram? Yeah. So here's the diagram for shame, which is pretty relevant to these need areas. So what we see is, as far as the emotion of shame goes, the two things that trigger it is disrespect. That's where somebody attacks your identity. And I say in the diagram, disrespect is managed by the appropriate setting of boundaries. But the other stimulus to shame is failure to meet internalized standards, what you've internalized from your group as the appropriate way to behave and be. And if there's a problem there, you're going to feel shame, and shame wants you to hide. And interestingly enough, the very kinds of ideation that people who are in heavy shame states, what this ideation is, it's abandonment ideation and or persecution ideation. You know, abandonment ideation like, I'm inferior, who would want to be with me? Think of that, you know, in the context of a hunting gathering society. You know, you don't want to be abandoned there because you're going to be dead, and you know, you don't want that. Persecution ideation, I'm inferior and will be ridiculed, humiliated, or physically attacked. In other words, kind of what's associated with a group shaming exercise, maybe short of the physical attack. So, you know, it's there, it's hardwired in. And if you've ever suffered a group shaming, you know how absolutely painful it is. You know, I'll give an anecdote. You know, where I was working at a mental health center, and we did a lot of treatment for people who were suffering addictions and had come out of the prison system and so on. And I was running my group, which consisted, you know, it was mostly men, but in any case, I was running my group, and one of our, another therapist, counselor there, came in to give a little bit of a talk about HIV, et cetera, at the time. And in this group, so we were sitting there, and she smelled alcohol on the breath of somebody who was near her. So she immediately stopped and said, you know what, we're going to breathalyze everybody in the group. Now, I did not believe that was the appropriate way to go. That's not the way I would ever handle that, you know, that kind of, because that, but, you know, that was part of a culture that existed back then, you know, where you would do that. You'd bring in a breathalyzer, everybody in sitting there, you could be 20, you know, everybody's going to get breathalyzed, type of a thing. So I said that I told her I'm not going to do that. And you know, I would deal with it myself after the group was over. And she got real angry at me and walked out, and then went ahead and reported me to the head of the center. And so the very next day, you know, I come in there and I get told, oh, we're going to have a meeting later today, you know, where we're going to address what went on in your group. So I went in. Now, I was very, very, you know, with some of these people that, you know, worked with me, you know, you really get a team feeling, you know, we're all on the same team. We have to watch each other's back, blah, blah, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And now suddenly everybody was attacking me and telling me I should not have done that I had humiliated the woman who wanted to do the breathalyzing in front of all these people. And, you know, and it was incessant. It was very painful for me. And I got, you know, so I just basically, you know, I explained where I was coming from as best I could, and that was it. And, you know, the meeting was over. And then I left, and I was, you know, after a while, and I was driving home, and I got very, very angry, you know, because I'd been shamed. I'd given a group shaming. And of course, you know, when you feel shame, what you're going to go to very quickly most of the time is anger. And so suddenly I just became totally angry at all these people. And I started to think, oh, you know, maybe I'll just quit. I don't want anything to do with them. You know, I'm going on and on. And then, you know, maybe a couple of hours later, you know, and I'm thinking about it. And then, of course, well, I have to address reality on the ground. If I want to continue to work and make a living, it's probably not a good idea to just suddenly quit, because I'm upset over this group shaming that I received in the workplace. So I went back there the next day, and I had worked out what I was going to do. And again, this is an important emotion management kind of a process. I had to do this in my mind. I decided what I was going to do is I was going to go to each one of these therapist counselors. And I was going to say to them, I'm sorry that, my actions and, got this woman that she felt humiliated. And I want to apologize for that. And that's what I decided I was going to go with. I wasn't going to go in with a lot of justification. I'd already explained what I was doing and how I viewed it. I was just going to simply say that, look, I'm sorry that, she got, and I did that with everyone, and they were all happy, hugging me and, so on. And it worked very, very well. And when you're managing but it was very powerful type of experience, the whole thing. And when you're managing emotions, you have to do that in this kind of a situation where you actually rehearse. After I was home and, he could think about it and come down from my, shame and anger response, I was able to figure out a strategy so that we could all move past this, and that's what I did. And yeah, I had to humble myself in a way, but I felt that in order to have the group cohesion and so on and everything, and to remain a part of this group, that's what I needed to do. So I went ahead and did it. And the lesson is sometimes it's the smartest move is just to apologize for maybe some harm, even if you didn't intend it or you won't, you felt it was justified. You have to understand what other people are going through and how they see things. But the group shaming is very powerful experience, and it's very effective. And usually, again, in these hunting, gathering, foraging type groups, if you get a group shaming and that doesn't work, what's coming next is going to be really severe. And either very frequently you'll be kicked out of the group, which is a death sentence, or they'll actually kill you. The whole group sometimes will just kill you mutually, kind of like the biblical thing where, you're going to throw stones at, somebody's head, everybody in the group will heave the stones. And you have to, and again, in the Bible, the Old Testament in particular, which is a very tribal kind of a document, if you violated the expectations of the tribe, it wasn't good for you at all. And of course, the 10 Commandments and, you can't have a group without having standards and expectations that keep the group strong, together, cooperating. And you have to stop the free riders. In our culture today, the free riding is incentivized. Actually, institutions are set up to basically free ride, and they get away with it. And it's very, very, it's so damaging. But okay, so let me go back to the final. Okay, that's okay. All right. So here we have the fourth human need, individual development. Now, again, think of being in a hunting gathering type of environment where, environments change, conditions change. Everybody needs to keep their skills up to standard. And so the expectation is, again, so if you're a hunter, and I don't know, you're using a spear or something of this nature, it's probably a good idea to keep practicing, what it is you're going to do to hunt the big game or this kind of thing. Or if your specialty might be, or, one of the skills you have is monitoring the environment in terms of weather conditions and availability of game to hunt, etc., or things to forage. You have to keep yourself up to speed, trying to improve yourself. And that's necessary in these kind of groups. Now, again, in the modern world, we can talk about, well, you go to school, you get your education, and we do like talking about that. But the thing is, a lot of times, once people get past the education stage, they kind of don't very much, do anything anymore, particularly sometimes when people get older. But it's important to do that because the unconscious mind wants you to be active. So the way I describe it here, individual development is in place if you are acquiring new skills or improving skill sets you have already assimilated. The need area is concerned with the acquisition of knowledge and skills for dealing with the environment. The unconscious mind does not care what you are learning or improving. And if the unconscious mind perceives that individual development is lacking, it will generate chronic emotional pain, usually a combination of sadness and shame. And also, the other negative emotions can come into play too. But the thing here is, it's, when I'd have somebody in therapy, and I would, and unfortunately I didn't figure this out till a number of years in. I was still able to be helpful, but once I got this kind of consolidated, and I would, be working with somebody, I would really emphasize that, you need to do it all. And so, for example, let's say you're living in near poverty or poverty, and that means until you get that fixed, you're going to be vulnerable to the chronic emotional pain. So you have to manage that for a good period of time. Just because it's chronic, or you can still manage it, and that's what you need to do until you can improve your situation, your financial material situation. And with individual development, there's so many different ways you can do that. You can take a class, you can do it, learn, take up a sport. In a modern world, there's just a zillion things you could do for individual development. There's also all sorts of community involvements you can have. Again, in the primitive world, with a hunting gathering kind of, you're just born into it. That's it. That's your community involvement right there. And there isn't going to be very many, there is no option really, other than what you're in. You're born into it, you pass on in it. But in our modern world, we can find all sorts of community involvements, clubs, this, that, they're all over the place. And that's fine as far as, managing your mental health. It doesn't matter what you do, but you might prefer to do something ethical, civic minded, as opposed to, organized crime type stuff, being in a gang, but, or a drug cartel or something. But the thing is, you can find it, but you have to do it. And if one doesn't work out, all right, fine, leave it. If you're in a group and you know how to set boundaries, and you're still having trouble with some of the people in the group, leave the group, just go to another one. What you can't do is to retreat into semi-isolation if you want to have mental health. And that's, what I would try to teach. And I do think that, as far as mental health goes, and other, things, people have to receive a certain kind of psychoeducational input. And unfortunately, what we're all, everybody gets socialized into with mental health is, if you're, everybody loves to talk about, all the mental health problems and, the PTSD and on it, in certain different times, there's different conditions which are very popular. But at the end of the day, it always requires emotion management, ability to adaptively set boundaries and to take care of your needs. And the mental health system is not set up to particularly accomplish that for people. Because as we know, what I was talking about last week with the medication, that's pretty standard. You're suffering emotional pain all the time. Let's give you some medication. It's a drug. And it will at least partially, if not totally, and sometimes, unfortunately, anesthetize your feelings. And that way you won't be so prone to having a complete breakdown from the emotional pain because we're just anesthetizing it. And then they can put you in therapy. But again, and that's a very common thing, therapy and medication. And in therapy, even though the therapy, and therapy varies, it really varies. So many times, see if I have, no, I guess I don't, but therapy is going to teach you, if it's good therapy, one way or the other, it will teach you how to manage your emotions and to, and your interpersonal relationships. That's a good thing. But let's say you're not able to really change your environmental circumstances, or as I've talked previously also, you're nutritionally deficient. And that's going to cause you, it's just another source of emotional pain. And if those things are going on, you're going to therapy, you like your therapist, you've got a decent relationship with the therapist, you're taking your medication, but let's say you're living at home with your family and they're just basically abusive and you're not able to successfully put the boundaries down for them. That means it's just going to continue on, and that has to be changed. And of course, the therapy, particularly with the nutritional deficiencies, the micronutrient deficiencies, if you go to therapy and the therapy is good, but you still are suffering the pain. And that can a lot of times make a person lose faith in what the therapy is trying to accomplish. I mean, yeah, I like the therapy, it seems good, but I still suffer. That's because, I've just got this chemical imbalance that even the medication doesn't seem to be able to deal with. It's very detrimental to have a mental health system that operates this way. And the final thing I would just say about that is that there are so many books, so many journal articles. There's so much information that's been produced over the years, critical of institutional psychiatry and the therapy industry. But it's never sufficient to break the hold that ultimately, the mental health is just totally controlled really by the pharmaceutical corporations. They control a lot of the media. They just control it all. And their goal is to get the medication in your body and get you addicted to it and to believe that it's necessary for you to be okay, to correct that chemical imbalance in your brain. And again, I understand the power of that a bit, it's really a brainwashing propaganda phenomenon. But, and when I retired from working in 2016, my goal was to go out to the communities as I had been doing for, Department of Public Health and to pro bono, be altruistic and just go ahead and give these presentations if people in the community were interested, trying to help them, get other people trained to, do this kind of thing. But it just was almost impossible to get any kind of traction because of the way people, had been conditioned to understand things. And even though, I don't think I ever gave a presentation where, generally speaking, it was very well received, even by professional people. But the thing is, probably most of those individuals never really implement. I have no idea whether they did or they didn't, but you can kind of see that it's very, very hard to change the normal ways of thinking about mental health. So I guess that's, and then finally, in summary, in the three building blocks of, if the three building blocks of mental health are effectively put in place and maintained, you will be, look what I used way back, the word, you will be vaccinated against most mental health pathologies. I got to change that word. But anyway, and then the three building blocks are emotion management, boundary setting, and satisfaction of needs. And they all have to be taken care of totally. So thank you very much for listening and giving me the opportunity, Stacy, to put this out there.
Great. Well, then I have one question. We can open up the floor if Daniel and Marcin have any questions. But you had mentioned the chemical imbalance that people are understanding or being told. Now, is there a real chemical imbalance, or is it really they're just being told that?
Well, so the thing, is that there appears to be reliable research data that shows if you have micronutrient deficiency, certain vitamin mineral deficiencies, that affects what's going on with now, in your brain, you have at least 200 neurotransmitters, I think. I could be wrong, but there's a load of them. But that it can impact pretty severely in some cases what's going on with your neurotransmitters. Now, in the mental health world, the way it's usually it's very simplified, the way they talk about it. It's like they talk about really almost all of it has been around two neurotransmitters out of all the others and all the interactions and the complexity of a human brain. They talk about serotonin and they talk about dopamine. Dopamine, so they would say if you have too much dopamine, that may make you have a bipolar disorder or a psychotic disorder. Too much excess dopamine, big problem. If you have too little serotonin, that might make you depressed and anxious. So if you don't have enough serotonin, that's going to make you depressed and or anxious. If you have too much dopamine, well, then you're going to get bipolar type manifestations, or you're going to get psychotic symptomology. And it's just, and of course, what really happens, to give you one example, just to answer your question, it does definitely prove to be the case that if you are nutritionally deficient, you're going to have more mental health problems. You're going to have trouble controlling your emotions and so on, and focusing your attention and that. You need those micronutrients. Now, so what I used to do is, and maybe at some point in the near future, I'll put it out here. I used to explain to people, I would draw a very crude diagram of two neurons, nerve cells in the brain. And so, one would be secreting, let's say, dopamine. And then in the next cell, the dopamine would be taken in and, kind of passed along. So if you had an excess of dopamine, what would happen is, in this very simplified conceptual diagram or way of looking at it, the neuron receiving the dopamine in the synapse, that little space between neurons in the brain, it would start to sprout new receptors. So now you would have more receptors to take in the dopamine. Now, when people would take a medication, all the antipsychotic medications basically stop the flow of dopamine. They slow it down majorly. That's what they do. Now, but here's the thing. So people are taking, the medication, and at a certain point, if they stop the medication, they just simply stop the medication, the brain is going to react in a very, very strong withdrawal kind of a syndrome. And it's the medication stops the flow of the dopamine. Once you take the medication away, the dopamine goes full bore, and you're going to have more and more receptors, and it's going to be and it is associated, at least in the sense of correlation, with psychotic symptomology. That's what and of course also if you are sleep deprived, you may also get psychotic symptomology. And so what generally I would just say is, if with the exception of a small group of people who you could argue do need to take medication, they're usually in the severe bipolar spectrum of problems, or psychotic, schizophrenic spectrum, and they do have organic problems that are there. But this is only a small group of people. Most other people who are categorized as having mental health problems, they do not have it. They're really neurology cases, and they should have been really taken care of. But of course, schizophrenia, that's as one person put it, that's the sacred, diagnosis. Yes, Stacy.
So do I hear what you're saying is that it's kind of like an over-diagnosis to tell everybody that has some kind of an issue, and these issues can probably be taken care of by what you're talking about, normal management, but they just throw that you have a chemical imbalance and it needs medication. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's just a marketing. For the most part, it's just simply a marketing thing. There's a lot of arguments in journal articles and things that completely go against even the simplistic, you don't have your serotonin enough in your brain, or you've got too much dopamine. That it's not like it's established, sound scientific knowledge. But the pharmaceutical companies, they wanted to, as I said in a previous talk, where psychiatrists made a big major league decision by 1980. They decided they were going to push medications and no longer do talk therapy. So and the pharmaceutical companies made a fortune, and they continue to make money on these psychiatric disorders. And again, they're see, and they are free riders. They are just cultural, societal free riders, these corporations like that, because they just simply lie. They lie.
We need to shame them.
Yeah. I mean, and it's incentivized because they get, and of course they get away with it. They just simply get away with it. They know they get away with it. And it's very, very, again, that kind of behavior in a hunting, gathering, foraging group would never be tolerated. Those people who operate those corporations, they would be group shamed very appropriately. And if they continued to try to run the scams that they do, et cetera, they would be put out of society or executed in those kinds of groups.
I like it.
Yeah, and that's, again, we're living, see, And again, if you believe, and I think it, it's not a bad way of thinking about things, the way the evolutionary, psychology and biology talk about this, where, there's this kind of struggle between genes which promote altruism, cooperation, generosity, etc., and genes which make a person more prone to free ride, whether that's either you bullying, threatening, that kind of thing, or just cheating, lying, and stealing. And it allows those individuals who are really prone to that in this kind of culture that we've created here in the United States and in other places to basically dominate and get all sorts of reinforcement, get the money, get the power, get the ability to do what they want, essentially. And it's and again, people, I think with the 3 building blocks of mental health on a certain level, people can, if you really assimilate it, you can use it to think about what you're doing in communities, or the way communities should be, and what people should really understand when you're considering talking about the idea of, having elections and all of this kind of thing. Because, really, and again, I'm tangenting, last thing I'm going to say is, it's pretty clear that the elites in our country and around the world, they feel basically that they can lie, manipulate, do whatever they want to, and get away with it. And they know, and it's just by experience, they know they can use deception, propaganda, which is mostly dishonest and deceptive, etc., to exercise control. And they never get called. Yes, Stacy.
And I think it's unfortunate that then they're the role models that people are emulating and think that that's the kind of behavior that we're supposed to use.
Exactly. And yeah, just go see the way, the educational system, the high, see what they teach you in law schools and business schools, like the University of Chicago Graduate School of Business, or the law school, the University of Chicago, and other places, all of these elite universities. They basically, they try to teach you what you need to know in order to lie, cheat, take advantage of people, and work for, essentially the corporate interests, which pay your, so.
Yeah, I've had that experience in the legal field, taking statements. It was very eye-opening. Let's see, Marson, Daniel, do you guys have any questions for Dan?
Yeah, I've got something that I found kind of interesting. You were talking about collective punishment earlier, Dan,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I noticed that under the Geneva Conventions, that's actually considered a war crime.
But by what I meant by that, yeah, that's a good question, because let me clarify what I really meant was, I didn't mean collective punishment I may have said that, but what I was meaning was not that there was going to be a whole group punished, because of what somebody did. What I meant was, in the hunting gathering groups, the entire group would punish the miscreants collectively.
Okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry about that.
And I think that is something that we should maybe bring back, or maybe in some way we are in the workplace a little bit, calling out corporations, but maybe we could do it a little bit better.
Well, again, the thing that's always amazed me, well, and I've told you, and I may have, in one of these times I was talking, my own experience, that when I tried to give my hoarding presentation out in the very far southeast side of Chicago, where they were being impacted very badly by pet coke piles, controlled by British Petroleum and the Koch brothers, and that was really toxic in the neighborhood. And when I did my hoarding presentation, I had one slide I called the British Petroleum Koch brothers hoard. And after doing the presentation, which was really well received and everything, I was called the very next day by the public information officer, and she told me that I was not allowed to talk to any media. And the only thing she wanted, other than giving me that order, was to ask me what I had said about that slide, just that one slide. And then when I tried to give another presentation, they, even though it had already been approved, they wouldn't green light it till I took that slide out. And that's because the mayor of Chicago at that time, was Rahm Emanuel, the mayor's office controls it all. And the one thing that is never allowed in public health is you don't go up against the corporate interests. You can maybe soft, criticize a little bit, but you don't do too much, because that's just not allowed. And it's, it's the corporations that are mostly responsible for most of the public health problems. So that's what we're in. And it's, again, another anecdote, is just quickly, in the mental health realm, they try to coerce you to do things which in graduate school you're told is ethically not appropriate. But when I would object, and I would almost fight with a couple of these administrators, and at the time, and one of them said to me, "Look, we live in a sociopathic society, so when in Rome." That's how it was. That's very deep in our culture, and you learn, because I wanted to keep my paycheck and work towards my pension, and you're taught the lesson. You do what we tell you to do, essentially, and if you don't, that's your freedom to resist, but you won't be around here, right? You can go work somewhere else.
That's like being excommunicated from the group.
Exactly. And living it, and so many people that I've had conversations with people. One guy who used to work for the DEA and for a long time, and how corrupt it all is. In a sense, it's hard to find an institution in our society today that's not pretty corrupted, even if it's just a soft, kind of corruption of, you're getting government money or tax breaks, and you're a social service kind of supposedly altruistic oriented organization. And yet, you kind of realize, if you want the money to come, and you better not step out of line. Don't step out of line, or it's not good. So yeah.
Yeah, the incentives are just all wrong. They
are.
don't teach us to do the right thing at all.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. That it added a lot to what we've already discussed, and I do feel that I can take what you've brought up tonight to my projects, working towards a plan, a cohesive plan, so that our communities have all the information that they need. So thank you very much for adding to that.
Sure.
And I will stop recording now. Thank you so much.